Listen, you and I need to look at this case file right now because something massive just shifted. I am talking about a tectonic shift in who is actually calling the shots in this ongoing investigation. We are finally seeing who holds the cards and what the raw relationship between the Guthrie family and the Pima County Sheriff's Office truly looks like today. This week, Sheriff Chris Nanos gave an interview to People magazine, and let me tell you, he dropped bombshells. He revealed new intelligence that instantly triggered more red flags than it resolved. But one specific detail completely alters our read on this entire missing persons case as we hit day 104. Journalist Brian Enton, who has tracked these leads since day one and earned his reputation as an airtight source on the ground, analyzed that exact interview word for word before pulling in Morgan Wright, a law enforcement veteran with 40 years of investigative experience under his belt, to decode the hidden message. Let us tear this intel apart piece by piece, because once you actually connect these particular dots, the resulting suspect board reveals a harsh reality that I do not think the general public is fully processing yet. Let us start with the heaviest piece of evidence. This is the exact detail that derailed Brian Enton, and as an analyst I can tell you it should absolutely freeze you in your tracks as well. Sheriff Chris Nanos admitted to People magazine that his direct line of communication with the Guthrie family is completely severed. He confirmed those critical updates are now exclusively handled by the FBI. Let me repeat that for the record. The acting sheriff of Pima County, the official commander of this active investigation, whose local department has never formally surrendered jurisdiction to the Federal Bureau, is essentially frozen out from speaking directly to the victim's family at the center of his own case. The feds took over. Pause the tape right there. You and I need to break down exactly what that signals from a tactical law enforcement perspective. Wright, backed by 4 decades of casework, did not mince words. He noted that in his entire career, an originating agency cutting contact with a victim's family is highly abnormal. The originating agency, the primary squad holding actual investigative authority. That means the sheriff's office is completely cut off from the Guthries. Analyze that for a second. You wear the badge. You stood at the podium during those press briefings. You publicly swore to the world that your detectives would close this file. You retained the technical command of the operation, yet the family of the missing woman will only brief with federal agents now. What does that intel tell an investigator Morgan Wright believes we are looking at 2 distinct scenarios? Scenario 1. A massive covert operation is unfolding in the shadows, hitting an advanced stage that lands strictly in federal jurisdiction, like active hostage negotiations, deep intelligence extraction, or a complex forensic breakthrough that legally demands heavy federal protocol. Scenario 2. The trust between the sheriff and the Guthrie family has completely imploded, forcing the FBI to intervene as intermediaries. And reviewing the file, both of those theories might be active simultaneously. Journalist Brian Enton has played this strictly by the book, honoring the family's trauma. But he openly questioned what the Guthries actually think about the sheriff behind closed doors, especially factoring in the leaked reports, factoring in every single procedural error documented so far, and mapping the heavy political friction between Nanos and the Board of Supervisors. The family is definitely seeing the negative headlines. The sheriff openly confessing that his direct line to the family is dead finally confirms a grim suspicion that has haunted the edges of this active case for months. The Guthrie family has completely lost faith in Chris Nanos, opting to route their intel through a more secure channel. Morgan Wright flagged a critical tactical issue that every good detective knows. He stressed that commanding a major ongoing criminal case requires constant ironclad communication with the victims. Always. Because the second you start building a prosecution for trial, you are going to need them. You need their full cooperation. You need their testimony. You need them completely on your side. If over 100 days have passed and you have torched their trust so badly they only trust federal agents, you have triggered a massive institutional failure that threatens the integrity of the prosecution. Then Nanos dropped another detail, perhaps the most jarring on-the-record admission he has offered since this case file was first opened. He confessed that the public is highly frustrated. He explicitly told a national publication that the Guthrie family is losing patience. He put their frustration on the permanent record. Frankly, analyzing the timeline, how could they not be? 104 days of dead ends. No arrests, no named suspects, zero verified proof of life. Their matriarch vanished 3 months ago, yet the sheriff keeps repeating his standard PR line about getting closer and believing the process. But the fact that he's officially acknowledging the family's anger while simultaneously leaking that he is entirely cut off from speaking with them directly tells you and me a truth about this botched investigation that no official press briefing will ever admit. Technically, the local sheriff calls the shots, but the feds are really running this investigation, and the Guthrie family knows that. Let us review the DNA evidence together. Sheriff Nanos made a statement this week that is both promising and deeply concerning, and expert Morgan Wright analyzed it, giving us the clearest map yet of where this forensic investigation actually sits. Here is the sheriff's exact quote for the record. He stated, "I know we have DNA that is unknown who the contributor or depositor is, but I think they are getting closer to finding out who that was. I have confidence in our labs. When the labs tell us, hey, there is nothing else we can do, well then maybe we have got a problem. We have got a cold case. But right now the labs are not telling us that. All right, let me dissect this evidence piece by piece. Every single detail matters here. First, the positive angle. He claims they are nearing an identity for the DNA source. That detail is new and very specific. This marks the first time he specifically used getting closer regarding the genetic profile instead of just the general case. If you study how investigative genetic genealogy actually operates, his exact wording points to something very specific. Wright broke this down well. He said, "When the sheriff says getting closer, the analysis is probably already done. Right now, they are probably deep into the genealogy phase, constructing family trees from partial genetic hits, branching out from distant cousin links in public databases, and isolating the suspect." According to Wright, that investigative phase requires 60 to 90 days just to map out the basic genetic network. Who is in the system? How are they related? Now look closely at the projected timeline. That hair evidence went to Quantico and Estrada Forensics mid-April. 60 to 90 days out lands squarely between mid-June and mid-July. We are rapidly approaching the window for those lab results. But here is the massive red flag in his statement. Nanos also stated, "If the labs tell us there is nothing else they can do, then maybe we have a cold case." Cold case. He uttered those words publicly for the first time. Brian Anton flagged that immediately. Anton claims his inside sources confirm the exact same thing. Detectives are banking entirely on this DNA, and if it fails, the trail goes completely dark. 0 solid suspects, no primary leads, just waiting on the lab. Wright drops some crucial context here, and I need you to evaluate this carefully with me. He said DNA does not come with a date and timestamp. You do not know when that hair was deposited or under what circumstances. The brutal reality is that the crime scene was completely unsecure during those initial chaotic days. Sergeant Aaron Cross himself called that first week absolute chaos. Investigatively, this creates a major loophole, meaning the genetic material found inside NY's home might not have been left by the actual perpetrator. It could easily belong to an innocent person who casually walked through the property right around the disappearance. That is a terrifying investigative hurdle. It means that even if this advanced genealogy gives detectives a verified name, they still have to establish a solid evidentiary context. They must corroborate it with separate physical evidence, otherwise any competent defense attorney will rip the case to shreds. Wright also scrutinized those gloves recovered 2 miles away from the target location. He declared that physical evidence a total dead end. Why? Because investigators could never definitively link those gloves back to the actual crime scene. Finding biological material on an object miles away is useless without a provable link. So where does that leave this investigation? This DNA profile remains their primary asset. The sheriff insists they are closing in, and the genealogical tracing continues. C.C. Moore and Estria Forensics are on the clock. This scientific method is incredibly robust and solves modern cases. However, hearing the top brass openly warn about a cold case proves exactly how much pressure is on that forensic lab. Literally everything. Now I need to focus on a critical observation Wright made recently. It provides a completely fresh, analytical framework for evaluating the timeline of this mystery. Once we analyze this together, you will examine that infamous doorbell security footage in a totally different light. For over 100 days, the investigative debate regarding the suspect at NY's door hinged on a single question. Was the intruder actively concealing his identity or staging a distraction for another motive? Wright presents an entirely different behavioral profile, and it completely ignores amateur speculation. He made that perfectly clear. His profile relies on tactical training field experience, the National Crime Victimization Survey, and raw empirical data. He concluded the suspect on the porch was never actually concerned about facial identification. Pause the timeline right there. The suspect did not care about being spotted. Consider what that psychologically implies. The intruder lingered outside, clenching a flashlight in his teeth, shoving vegetation right over the security lens. He remained exposed long enough that if the device actively recorded to cloud storage, his entire tactical sequence would be fully documented. Listen, the suspect didn't care about his face. He had a mask. He didn't care about his body, either covered completely from head to toe. What actually terrified him, as Morgan Wright pointed out, was his vehicle. Let's break down this logic because it's airtight. A getaway car leaves a forensic trail that a masked face simply doesn't. A vehicle gives us make, model, production year, paint color, even partial plates. Any unique dent or scratch caught on a security camera gives investigators the leverage to pull a match from DMV databases. We run intelligence files and execute reverse lookups exactly like the tactics Wright used during his time in law enforcement. Wright recalled working a fatal crash as a state trooper. They only recovered a tiny grill fragment, but from that single scrap they figured out the year, the exact make, the model, and a partial VIN. They traced the entire vehicle from one tiny piece of physical evidence. Now, apply that exact same forensic principle to our case. If that smart doorbell was actively capturing and sending surveillance footage to the cloud the moment that car arrived, the exact spot where the victim's blood trail abruptly ends at the curb, detectives would have secured that video within hours. They'd have a target vehicle to track down. So the intruder at the door wasn't blocking the lens just to protect his own identity. He blinded that camera to conceal his ride. He understood the car was the single most traceable piece of evidence in his entire kidnapping operation. This shifts my entire profile of the suspect. It proves this individual clearly knew how police track vehicles during criminal investigations. They knew a masked face on security footage is a minor hurdle. But catching a getaway car on camera, that's a fatal error. The kind that leads a SWAT team straight to your registered address in under 24 hours. This isn't a rookie making a sloppy, impulsive mistake. This is a calculated offender who anticipated police tactics and adapted. Wright also made a crucial observation regarding the crime scene blood. He said, "Look closely where the blood goes. Look where it finally stops. It stops dead exactly where a suspect vehicle would need to park to load Nancy inside." That isn't just circumstantial guesswork. It's basic physics. We are analyzing the hard physical record of what went down that curb early February 1st. She was forced into a vehicle where the blood cuts off and they fled. And the driver knew long before they ever pulled up to that address that they absolutely could not let a lens catch their escape route. All right. Now, I want to dig into the thousands of video clips, something Sheriff Nanos brought up directly during his recent People magazine interview, and writes, "The critique of that approach is the most practically useful insight on this investigation we have heard in weeks." Nanos stated investigators have thousands upon thousands of clips from traffic intersections and Ring doorbells that they need to meticulously log, sorting all the white trucks into one pile, grouping the red sedans in another. They feel they have to organize everything. That way, when a suspect named John Doe finally pops up, detectives can search the database and ask, what else links to this guy? On paper, that sounds perfectly logical, doesn't it? You log every single data point, get a suspect name, and then run a cross-reference. But Wright argues that investigative method is entirely backwards. His breakdown is brilliant, and you and I are going to unpack his logic step by step. He pointed out, we already have a vital clue. We know the exact time frame when Nancy was abducted. The medical pacemaker stopped syncing at 2:28 in the morning. That tells us she was inside a vehicle by that exact minute. She was moving between 2:12 and 2:28 based on the accelerometer. That is our hard timeline. So rather than logging every random car and praying for a suspect's name to match, reverse the tactic. Isolate that 2:12 to 2:28 window. Map out every single vehicle driving within a reasonable radius of the victim's house during those specific minutes. That becomes your suspect pool. And that data set is massively smaller than logging every car on every camera in town. In forensics, we call this egress analysis. You analyze the escape routes, the southbound roads toward Interstate 19, the path leading down toward Nogales, the main transit corridors heading for the border. I would pull logs for whatever cars were moving through those checkpoints during that exact time frame. Then you just start crossing them off. Wrong direction, strike it. Wrong vehicle class, strike it. Doesn't fit the timeline, strike it. You keep aggressively filtering the footage until you hold a small, manageable list of genuine suspect vehicles. Then, and this is where my analyst brain lit up, he said, if one of those targeted cars hits a border crossing camera within a realistic timeline, that link is massive. Because driving a hostage from the victim's house straight down to the Nogales crossing takes time. You can't clear that distance in 15 flat. It is geographically impossible. But hitting that checkpoint an hour and a half to 2 hours later, very plausible, especially if they took a detour to cool off mid-route. So we take our egress window targets, compare them to border crossing logs at the projected time, and look for our match. Makes sense. We aren't guessing here. This is pure logistics and hard physics. Let's step into the war room. We're looking at analysis that cuts thousands of videos down to just a few real suspects. Morgan Wright actually ran these numbers. He built an egress map plotting every single exit route out of the Catalina foothills and the tight time limits for each. And he noted the approach Nanos described. Cataloging everything and waiting for a suspect name to match against is less efficient than starting with the time window and working backward. Now, does that mean the local team is ignoring this? Not exactly. They could very well be running both of these angles simultaneously. But here is what this expert analysis reveals about that vehicle. The exact car the intruder desperately wanted hidden. The figure at the door wasted precious seconds, ensuring the lens never caught it. And it might already be traceable using time-stamped data exit maps and border crossing logs. The real question I have is that work finished, and has it uncovered a lead? The police just refused to share publicly yet. So Brian Anton finally hit Wright with the exact question that has haunted this entire investigation since the very first morning. Did a simple break-in go sideways, or was this a calculated abduction? Wright's answer was the most rock-solid conclusion I have seen from any specialist with his deep background. He claims almost zero evidence points to a botched robbery. Let's dig into his logic together and see why he said that. The psychology here is key. He said, a burglary and a kidnapping require completely different skill sets, completely different mindsets. Burglary is strictly about stealing. You break in, grab the valuables, and run. You avoid anyone inside the house at all costs. Seeing people means trouble. It means witnesses. It means the whole job gets sloppy. Kidnapping is entirely about control. You have to plan to dominate the scene the second you breach the door. It takes real strategy to physically handle another human being. You have to prep the getaway car, the holding spot, and figure out your next moves, with a victim fighting you every step. Thieves do not just accidentally pivot into taking hostages mid-robbery. Those two mental states simply do not mix. You do not break in hoping to steal a flat screen and leave dragging an 84-year-old woman out unless that was your absolute target from the start. Then Wright dropped what I consider the most critical analysis of this entire true crime mystery in over 100 days. He bluntly called this a no-body homicide, not just a missing person file, not a ransom situation, but a no-body homicide. Meaning, he thinks Nancy is already gone, and our investigation needs to pivot to that harsh reality. He backed it up with facts, her age, her bad heart, the late hour of the ambush, the blood found at the scene, the life-saving pills left sitting right there on the kitchen counter, the strange fact that the ransom demands hit local news stations instead of contacting her family directly, and that untouched crypto wallet. In my view, all his data points scream that she is not locked in a basement waiting for a payoff. Instead, it points to a horrific crime finished on the night of January 31st. Now, I have to tread lightly here. The police have not officially announced Nancy is dead, and her family is still holding on to hope. Even survivors like Elizabeth Smart, who beat the odds herself, have gone on record saying Nancy might very well still be breathing. But Wright's grim conclusion matches what I have been hearing in private from seasoned law enforcement contacts for weeks now. And to hear him state it out loud, a no-body homicide, the physical evidence leads right there, and we have to face that brutal fact honestly. Because if his analysis is right, our whole focus shifts. We stop searching for a hostage and start building a rock-solid murder case for the courts. That silent pivot in strategy might be exactly why the FBI just took over all direct contact with the family. Let's tackle one last question Wright broke down. It is the exact debate that has split crime analysts like us since day one. A solo act or a duo? Plenty of smart investigators lean hard into the two-suspect theory. Ripping an 84-year-old woman from her home, driving her, keeping her quiet. That workload usually demands a crew. The back floodlights shattered the exact second the front lens was blocked. 2 hits at once, 2 specific jobs, 2 suspects. But Wright highlighted a glaring detail that I honestly believe blows that theory open and explains why 100 days later nobody claimed that $1.2 million bounty. He reminded us that 2 people cannot keep their mouths shut forever. Only one person can. Now, frame that against the massive payout. $1.2 million sitting totally untouched for over 3 months. You and I know the truth here. If a partner exists, greed would have broken them by now. That is just the cold, hard math. Let's look at the facts together. Maureen O'Neill and Steve Moore both flagged this. Every expert reviewing these case files agrees completely. You put 2 suspects under intense interrogation pressure with that massive cash reward hanging there. One always cracks. But the tip line is dead quiet. No one wants the payout. Morgan Wright analyzed this silence and believes it points straight to a solo operator. A lone wolf suspect. Just one individual operating without a co-conspirator to stress over. A perpetrator carrying the secret entirely alone. They might be operating so far outside this local community that no one in their circle suspects a thing. He highlighted the pattern of transient offenders. Look, if this suspect isn't local to Tucson, our police databases will be completely empty. No hits at all. 0 prior arrests, no intelligence briefs, and absolutely no field interview cards. The suspect drifted in, executed the crime, and vanished. We have 0 organic leads in the local system to drag them back onto our radar. This explains why even with surveillance video, a confirmed backpack match, and a solid physical profile, we are still looking at 0 suspects. It is not due to lazy detective work. The perpetrator we are hunting simply left no local footprint behind. Now Morgan Wright remained cautious. He noted both scenarios remain completely possible. He validated Jim Clementi's crime scene analysis regarding the low-angle blood spatter, which strongly suggests the victim was physically carried away. That implies either 1 very strong suspect or 2 sharing the weight. But 100 days pass, and for $1,200,000, total silence. To me, that stands as the strongest piece of circumstantial evidence for a lone attacker. An investigative theory built entirely on what is missing from the picture. Fascinating. Let's break down the jurisdictional friction next. Nanos specifically used his People magazine interview to completely dispute former Director Kash Patel's public statements on the case. The sheriff claims federal coordination started almost immediately after the victim went missing. He insists the FBI was present from day one. He dismissed Patel's critique as mere opinion, officially branding several of the director's statements as factually wrong. He maintains the aerial search launched without delay. According to his timeline, teams located the blood evidence and search operations executed their protocols perfectly. You and I have dissected these conflicting reports already, but a brand new variable surfaced in the investigation this week. Dr. Matthew Hines from the Pima County Board dropped a detail in his recent briefing that reporter Brian Enton realized no one had tracked yet. Hines explained that beyond the tactical advantage of letting the FBI process the DNA, there was a stark financial reality. He calculates this Nancy Guthrie missing person case has already cost Pima County roughly $1 million. Had local law enforcement just transferred the DNA evidence and let the Bureau lead the operation immediately, the county budget would have been spared. An FBI-led manhunt is entirely funded by federal tax dollars. Instead, local taxpayers absorb the massive cost of an active crime scene that demands resources way beyond a standard sheriff's payload. $1 million blown on a high-profile case that the federal director insisted his agency was ready to command. They could have deployed from night one with hundreds of field agents, fixed-wing aircraft, and the best forensic lab. Yet the sheriff said no. Now analyst Morgan Wright stayed highly objective when evaluating this public backlash against Nanos. He stated, "Not all the criticism is justified. Civilians often judge cases without grasping real-world investigative procedures. Forensic DNA profiles do not process in 44 minutes just because that fits a prime-time television script. Degraded or mixed DNA samples are incredibly complex to isolate for a courtroom conviction. The hard science dictates these timelines, which the public rarely factors in." However, he pointed out the official case file doesn't lie about whether federal agents were actually requested. The former director gave us one timeline, the sheriff claims another, but the documented evidence reveals the absolute truth. And my analysis of that record shows the Pima County Board legally forcing their sheriff to testify under penalty of perjury. A bipartisan coalition of county officials actively demanding his immediate resignation. We are tracking $1 million local dollars burned on a case file the FBI offered to lead from the jump, and the Guthrie family has completely severed all communication with the sheriff. That is the documented trail, and it is bulletproof. So what do you and I make of day 104? Let's synthesize the latest actionable intelligence. Local law enforcement has officially lost their direct line to the victim's family. Federal agents are managing all family updates now, from an analyst chair that proves exactly who is steering this manhunt no matter what the department letterhead claims. The forensic biology remains our absolute linchpin. The sheriff claims they are finally zeroing in on the genetic profile source. Wright caught that specific terminology, suggesting advanced genetic genealogy tracking is already fully operational. With a 60 to 90-day lab window, we are potentially just weeks away from a major investigative breakthrough. However, Nanos admitted that if the forensics fail, this investigation hits a wall. Hearing the top official publicly drop the phrase "cold case" for the very first time is jarring. Let's dig into this together. It isn't comforting, but it's the cold truth. Everything now hinges on what C.C. Moore and Estra Forensics pull together. Morgan Wright's vehicle theory completely flips how we view that doorbell footage. The suspect wasn't blocking the lens to mask his face. He was hiding the getaway car. Why? Because that vehicle was the single piece of this entire operation that investigators could actually track down and identify. That kind of tactical planning, obsessing over vehicle blind spots, points to someone who knows the system or mapped this crime with terrifying precision. Police are logging thousands of video clips. But Morgan Wright argues the investigation needs to flip the script completely. Isolate the exact time window, draft an escape route map, then check those against border crossings. We need to reverse engineer the physical limits of the escape, rather than just waiting to name a suspect. Meanwhile, the lone wolf theory isn't proven yet, but the total silence on the tip line speaks volumes. $1.2 million over 100 days. 0 calls. If 2 suspects pulled this off, keeping that quiet is nearly impossible. Let me lay out the raw facts about our blind spots here. We still have no idea where Nancy Guthrie is. We don't even know if she survived. We are in the dark on the Quantico DNA results, and we still can't explain those 4 crucial days where Kash Patel claims the local police froze out the FBI. We still don't know what is on that sealed 911 tape. Plus, even though the family was publicly cleared, this investigation stubbornly keeps circling back to the inner circle who saw Nancy right before she vanished. Why is that? These aren't minor missing details. These are the core questions. But look at the shift in power. The FBI has officially taken over as the Guthrie family's main contact point. That is a massive deal. That isn't just standard police procedure. When a missing woman's family cuts off local cops and only communicates with the federal agents, that speaks volumes about who actually holds the evidence, who holds the clues, and who the family genuinely trusts to close this case. The feds have the physical DNA at Quantico. They have the funding. The Bureau holds the top-tier genetic genealogy experts. And crucially, they have the family's faith. Chief Nanos can give quotes to People magazine all day, but the family's total silence toward him tells us everything. At the 100-day mark, Savannah Guthrie posted a Mother's Day message that hits like a freight train. Mother, daughter, sister Nan, we miss you with every breath. We will never stop looking for you. We won't rest until we finally bring you home. 104 days now. And the pacemaker inside Nancy Guthrie's chest is still tracking, still logging data, counting every single minute she's been missing. The absolute truth of her movements every second since 2:28 that morning of February 1st is locked inside a matchbox-sized device planted in the chest of a woman who desperately needs to be found. The feds are driving the bus now. The samples are at Quantico. And C.C. Moore doesn't give up easily. Then there's the dead silence on that $1.2 million reward. So where do you and I stand? That unclaimed cash is either proof of a solo suspect or a dam that's about to break. If you hold any clue about Nancy Guthrie's vanishing, dial 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can stay entirely off the record. The payout is legitimate. This active case is far from cold and Nancy is still out there. Stick around.